Hi everyone, Sean here and welcome to another episode of Lines in Sand. Today I want to talk about something that I came across when researching the Great Pyramid power plant theory of all things, and that is the prospect of clandestine, unreported digging having taken place within the Great Pyramid sometime in the mid-90s after the discoveries made inside the shafts, particularly the Queen's Chamber shafts, in which Rudolf Gantenbrink found two so-called doors blocking the end of both the north and south shafts after exploring them with a small robot. Gantenbrink's explorations with his robot are quite infamous now and opened up a whole new world of theorizing around the purpose of the Great Pyramid. But if you are new here, the Cliff Notes version of events is that Rudolf Gantenbrink placed a camera mounted on a small robot inside the small shafts that led out of the so-called Queen's Chamber to the north and to the south. The purpose of these shafts has long been debated, and the footage and findings reported by Gantenbrink and his team more or less added to the speculation rather than clearing anything up. Don't get me wrong, this was a momentous discovery, but one that just led to more questions, as you would expect. It's worth mentioning here too that the shafts of the Queen's Chamber were explored in 3 separate stages under 3 separate projects. I know I was guilty of mixing these up, at least when I first started looking into the Great Pyramid. There's always the possibility, of course, that I'm just a complete idiot, but I think it's definitely worth clarifying here before we go any further. In 1992 and 1993, Rudolf Gantenbrink explored the Queen's Chamber shafts with the U-Boat and U-Boat 2 robots. His work was also under the name the U-Boat Project. This is not to be confused with further exploratory work carried out in 2002 when the National Geographic Society sent a further robot up the shafts and drilled through the so-called door at the end of the southern Queen's Chamber shaft. After this, work carried out under the Jedi project analysed the findings further, as this robot was better equipped to look behind the drilled hole, as well as take measurements and other handy functions that are beyond the scope of this video. Now, why am I telling you this? This video focuses on reports made in the 1990s, after Rudolf Gantenbrink's robots successfully explored the Queen's Chamber shafts for the first time, but importantly, before we knew what was behind the doors at the end of the shafts. Speculation was, of course, rife about what was behind Gantenbrink's doors, if they were even doors at all, and I don't suppose it is much different to us right now, actually, to use a modern-day parallel, having just seen inside the North Face corridor for the first time in early 2023. Speculation and propositioning about what lays beyond, beneath, above, around this new corridor, about what it is used for, why it is designed and built the way it is. We've picked over this on this very channel, and so have the bigger channels in this field, such as History for Granite, in much more detail. A similar kind of thing was going on in the 90s with Gantenbrink's doors. What on earth could have laid behind them? Why did they exist? So again then, where am I going with all of this in the context of this video? In my research for my Giza power plant video, I was introduced to the work of Tom Danley. Tom Danley is an acoustics engineer, and a seemingly world-renowned one at that, having worked with NASA, I believe, as a contractor via the company Intersonic, but through a series of events, all of which can be read fully in a fascinating blog post by Tom on prosoundweb.com, which I will link below the video, led Tom to perform acoustic analysis within the Great Pyramid of Giza. After his work was featured in Mystery of the Sphinx, presented by Charlton Heston, the producer of that show came to Tom with the proposition of performing the analysis of the acoustics within the Great Pyramid chambers. In 1997, Tom Danley was flown to Egypt, all expenses paid to carry out this work. There were several flies in the ointment, however, and the audio equipment that he flew to Egypt with ended up getting lost. It was never found, and it seems from his writing that Tom was also never reimbursed for the loss of audio equipment. Nevertheless, and luckily, new equipment was able to be sourced in Egypt ahead of schedule, and Tom's work could continue. The production had to get a wooden skid made by a local Egyptian carpenter in order to lug all of the heavy audio and TV equipment up inside the king's chamber, which made me think of the stacks of scan pyramids gear that can be seen throughout the pyramids today. I don't envy the poor souls slugging that stuff around the inside of ancient pyramids, I'll tell you that much. I won't go into the detail of Tom's own experiments, but he and the production team had run of the Great Pyramid every night after 8 p.m. In his account of his time at the pyramid, Tom also provides great detail about what it is like to crawl into the so-called relieving chambers above the king's chamber. We kind of take it for granted that these chambers are accessible, thanks in part to both ancient Egyptians for the initial tunnel and to the destructive explorations of the explorers from days past, such as Howard Weiss and Giovanni Caviglia. But reading a first-hand account of how these chambers are accessed really puts the journey into perspective. Tom writes, "To reach the upper levels above the king's chamber, one re-enters the grand hallway, then climbs 40 foot up an old extension ladder to a hole in the wall. A small bundle of knotted cords comes out of the hole, which is also the entrance to a small tunnel. Once in the tunnel, you make a right turn and crawl a little more to an enlarged area carved out around a red granite wall with a hole in it. Climbing through that opening, you come into the chamber directly above the king's chamber. This room is only about 4 foot tall, but is the same length and width as the king's chamber. The ceiling is flat and is covered with some very old graffiti." Now, this is where Tom's blog gets very interesting, and it's why I wrote this small video. In regards to going up into the second relieving chamber, he states the following. "It was in this room that we found a huge pile of burlap sacks filled with the chips the diggers had removed from the level below. The room also featured a large trash pile and hundreds of water bottles from the diggers. It's clear they were at work for some time." Let's think about this for a moment. This is 1997. Why is digging taking place in the relieving chambers above the king's chamber? What could possibly be the reason for digging in this area? You will not find any information on reported or official digs in this area, so what exactly is going on here? Well, it all seems to be a bit of a mystery. Nothing more is mentioned in Tom Danley's blog, but we can expand upon this a little more. The first page of the Giza Power Plant book by Dunn states that the summer of 1997 was filled with reports of clandestine digging inside the Great Pyramid. Dunn follows this up by proposing that there was eyewitness accounts of secret tunnel digging having taken place in the first relieving chamber. Whether he has sources of additional eyewitnesses other than Tom Danley, I do not know. Dunn also states that when quizzed about this tunnel digging in the relieving chambers, local officials expressed surprise at the news and stated that they knew nothing about it. What I do know, thanks to the text of this book, is that Dunn followed up this mystery reported by Danley by contacting the man himself. Tom Danley, writing here in an email to Christopher Dunn and reproduced in the latter's book, states, "Whoever was doing it was being careful to hide their work. There was no dust downstairs at the time, like is mentioned at Hoagland's site, and the burlap bags of chips were hauled up to the next level up and heaped against the wall, along with many water bottles and trash. I do not think that the officials knew about it either, as they let us go up there with no chaperone, and our inspector was very surprised when I told him that I thought there was new digging going on." Now, this is something very interesting to think about. If this statement is accurate and the Egyptian authorities were not aware of secret digging taking place in what is a very hidden part of the Great Pyramid, then who could have been responsible for it? Were the government making secret excavations and denying all knowledge of this happening? Or was there another party involved, digging under the noses of the keepers of the ancient pyramids? This seems unlikely due to the fact that the pyramids are secure and guarded. It definitely seems possible with the right contacts and perhaps with the right amount of money being placed in the right palms to get access to areas where others are perhaps not usually allowed. But for a sustained, ongoing digging project to be carried out deep within the pyramids without the Egyptian authorities knowing or turning a blind eye seems very unlikely to me. So it looks like this cannot be corroborated, that this is a singular report by one man perpetuated by Dunn by publishing these tasty details in his controversial book, right? In then comes Randy Koppang, and I apologise if I'm pronouncing that surname incorrectly. Randy wrote the article entitled The Great Pyramid Tunnel Mystery for a website whose name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. The link, as always, will be in the video description. Now, this article is full of very, very fascinating information. It's also quite long, with various threads being weaved throughout, so bear with me when I attempt to extract the pertinent information. First off, Danley's account is recounted in far more detail here than anywhere else. When placing a vibration sensor, Danley noticed the Colonel Howard vice hole in the south-facing granite wall of Davidson's chamber, the first of 4 construction chambers above the King's chamber ceiling. So he climbed through, finding an obvious new tunnel, in the process of being expanded, where the Colonel Vice tunnel leaves off. Danley and Said's film crew reportedly filmed this new tunneling. On the second level above Davidson's chamber, Danley found numerous large bags of Tura limestone tunnel tailings, hoisted up at great effort for apparently temporary storage, not yet taken down for removal. But then there was a lot of rock to be cleared. Koppang goes on to detail Danley's interview on the Art Bell show, confirming, quote, that there were enlarged intercavities at 2 points along the new tunnel. Danley and his fellow guest Richard Ogland agreed, quote, that these 2 rough-hewn enlarged cavities made no sense. The pair proposed that the newly excavated space in the rock was perhaps then for the following 2 reasons: way stations for bagged tailings waiting for removal, implying continued excavation, or for probing adjacent areas for something. Astoundingly, Danley goes on to say that these excavations could fit 10 to 12 people inside. Koppang's article continues to dish out further information, stating that in an article that Danley had published online himself, for which no link is unfortunately provided, Danley, quote, told how he briefed the escort at length regarding these facts, even drawing a map, end quote. Koppang is referring here to the filming crew's chaperone that they would have had assigned during their time in the Great Pyramid. Koppang then quotes Danley directly as having written, "The next day, he, the escort, went up to see for himself and then reported it to his boss, which he said he was a little reluctant to do. With reported disbelief, the inspector personally verified the tunneling because, as Danley reported, he knew nothing about it." And this is where it gets very, very interesting. Forgive me for quoting such large chunks of this article, but I want to get the exact quote and context exactly right. This disbelief and reluctance by the monument security escort to report to his superior is meaningful. The inspector's boss would be immediately under Zahi Hawass, Director General of the Pyramids, and any such tunneling project would have certainly have to be formally approved with the signature of Dr. Hawass. Why then would the inspector know nothing about it? And as an enigmatic aside to this question, as prelude to Danley's appearance on the Art Bell show, Mr. Bell quoted his previous guest, Gantenbrink, as saying Zahi Hawass had confirmed to him that there was digging being done above the King's chamber. Now then, this has turned into quite a little theatre of events, but it doesn't stop there. Randy Koppang writes that corroboration of all of this is, of course, absolutely needed. Koppang writes, "Based on conventional Egyptological academics, there could be no reason whatsoever for permanently damaging this monument with structural tunneling. None. Period. Allegations of secret unknown chambers have been scientifically refuted, and even Rudolf Gantenbrink's robot exploration is presumably not worthy of pursuit." Now, this hits on a lot of the same points that Christopher Dunn made around such digging activity. However, Koppang was lucky to have a corroborator in the previously mentioned Richard Ogland. Ogland sent someone named Larry Hunter to Egypt, also in the summer of 1997, to, quote, independently investigate and film corroborative evidence of Thomas Danley's claimed experience. Koppang makes it clear that any filming done by the production company of the new excavation in the time of Tom Danley was not made available to them, but that Hunter was able to successfully capture his own images. Now, if you go to the article by Randy Koppang on the web, you will, of course, find these images to be missing. Instead, you'll get a series of dead links left over in text format from some long-dead JavaScript applet or command. This led me to the trusty Wayback machine, and I went all the way back to the earliest captured snapshot of this website that is still available, and that is November 23rd, 2005. I was stunned to find images from, assumingly from Hunter and perhaps edited by Koppang or someone else, all of which detail and corroborate some of the things that Danley is claiming to have seen. Unfortunately, I hit another brick wall when I found that the thumbnails to a lot of these images could not be expanded as it relied on JavaScript to work. This functionality on this site is long dead, and attempting to get the JavaScript applet to run and show the full-size images inside the Wayback machine was a no-go. These tiny images were so close, but they were still impossible to decipher. Thankfully, I'm not as totally and completely brain-dead as my accent may indicate. I am an IT grunt by trade, and with experience long ago in the halcyon days of creating websites of handwritten HTML and JavaScript and so on, I was able to extract these long-forgotten images from this site by taking the functional image URL of another full-sized image on the website and extracting the live address portion only, leaving the Wayback machine URL gubbins to one side. I noticed that the naming convention of the JPEG files used on Koppang's article was somewhat sequential, so by manually taking rough guesses as to the names of the files, I was able to directly load these long inaccessible images directly into my web browser, which I was pretty happy about. I won't lie to you, 10 internet points to me. But yeah, I'm now of course able to share these exciting long forgotten images with you all, so please, if you're just listening along rather than watching, I implore you to take a look at your screen. These images are all credited to the Enterprise mission, so perhaps they are easier to access elsewhere, but alas, here we are. So what did Larry Hunter find on his visit to the Great Pyramid? He was able to corroborate some of the specifics of Danley's tunneling claims. Inside the Grand Gallery, he photographed, quote, a two-piece ladder, an electrical power cable and rope extending up to Davison's chamber, and burlap bags full of fresh-hewn limestone tailings sitting right on the great step to the king's chamber. Koppang's article calls into question what Zahi Hawass knew about this digging, and why it was being kept from the general public. In an article in the Guardian newspaper published on March 25, 1997, a month after Tom Danley's visit, Zahi Hawass stated the following: "There is no secret work at Giza. Any research project is approved both by the Permanent Committee of Supreme Council for Antiquities and our Security Department." Koppang asks, rightly so, if this is the case, then why didn't the official chaperone that accompanied Danley and the production team he was working with know anything about this digging activity? Here's where things get a little bit wild. This is not what I was expecting when I started pulling at the thread planted in the opening pages of Chris Dunn's book, but before leaving Egypt in the summer of 1997, Larry Hunter took his photographs of the evidence for the supposed illegal digging in the Great Pyramid and submitted them to the police. Koppang writes, "He first submitted photos and displayed limestone tailing samples to the General Mohammed Ashik and second-in-command Mustafa Anna at the tourist police field station adjacent to the Great Pyramid. After learning of their reluctance to investigate, Hunter, to light a fire under them, phoned to tell them he had submitted the same evidence to Mohammed Sherdi, assistant managing editor of El Waft newspaper. Mr. Sherdi had begun a 3-part series publishing his investigations into the matter as of September the 4th, 1997. I apologize as always for any pronunciation issues with the previous quote. This indeed rustled some feathers, however. Zahi Hawass issued a further statement on the work. Instead of now flat out denying it, he claimed that this work was undertaken to clean and restore hieroglyphics. As Koppang immediately points out, there is no hieroglyphics in Davison's chamber, the first chamber above the king's chamber. He goes on to write that Hawass shut the Great Pyramid for a time in 1998 for deep cleaning. This appears to be true, but in regards to the relieving chamber, Koppang asks, given that the area is not accessible to anyone generally, and there was never anything archaeologically symbolic to view there in the first place, one wonders why all this cleaning is required to the extent of producing large limestone rock quantities. You have to admit, he has a point. Larry Hunter returned to Egypt in July of 1997, a month, I believe, after his initial visit to follow up on his demands for a formal inquiry into the secret tunneling above the king's chamber. I ask you to bear with me here, things are about to get even more bureaucratic and confusing. Mohammed Sherdi, the assistant managing editor of El Waft newspaper, was invited to Zahi Hawass's office, and Sherdi brought Larry Hunter along with him. The article here states that Hawass had now entered into full damage control mode, and I quote, "Due to the publicity, Hawass had apparently initiated damage control. Shirdi represents substantial editorial clout in Cairo, and controversy was spreading internationally. Thus, Shirdi and Hunter presented their case to Dr. Hawass. The root source of evidence for the tunneling had always come from Boris Said's film project, as described by the eyewitness, Tom Danley. When challenged with this, Dr. Hawass produced a faxed letter of disclaimer authored by Said denying any involvement whatsoever. Yet, with an air of neutrality, Hawass explained, "There is activity of cleaning hieroglyphics in the pyramid." But the rumours now being denied by Mr. Said were, according to Hawass, an effort by Said to coerce Hawass into granting Said a licence to complete the MBC film he's been doing, featuring the show activities at the Sphinx, not the Great Pyramid. As you can see, things were starting to go around in circles. A web of intrigue built around the legitimacy of the work that Said, who appears to have led the production on both the Sphinx documentary as well as the later acoustic tests inside the Great Pyramid involving Tom Danley. I won't go into it all here, as this has already gone deeper than I intended, and the bureaucracy of the Antiquities Department does not interest me all that much, but Koppang goes on to write, quote, "The data derived from Danley's expertly applied testing for acoustic properties of the Great Pyramid was being used as computer functions in a context totally unknown to Danley." This feeds back to Chris Dunn's Giza Power Plant book, where Dunn mentions that Tom Danley appeared to have been under some sort of NDA regarding his work at the pyramid, which was complicated by the fact that he had gone public about the digging that he saw during his time during his acoustic tests, whatever they were for. As far as we know, Tom Danley has not elaborated further on this matter, but he is quoted by Koppang as saying, "So far as the Egyptian officials are concerned, they were, near as I could tell, a costly, non-stop pain in the rear with all their infighting and internal struggles and grease money." Don't pull any punches there, Tom. Rounding this confusing chapter then of the Great Pyramid history off, Randy Koppang writes the following. "Mohammed Shirdi was allowed to inspect the Davidson's chamber area, taking photos. He claims he saw no evidence of tunneling, but the physically demanding circumstances of the situation may have kept the precise area in question out of his reach. Likewise, Larry Hunter's Egyptian sources say that they know of an artisan who was sent in to construct a facade covering the tunnel entrance, which, given the absolute darkness of the area, would be effective." We come full circle now to why I mentioned Gantenbrink's exploratory activities in the opening minutes of this video. It is speculated by Chris Dunn on pages 205 and 208 of his book that the diggers were perhaps attempting to reach the doors at the end of the Queen's Chamber shafts, using the first relieving chamber as a starting point for this activity. It reminds me much of the tunnel that exists beyond the niche of the Queen's Chamber, which goes off seemingly at random into the core masonry before stopping. This is said to have been excavated by treasure seekers that saw significance in the niche and the space behind it, and figured that further digging would lead to a great discovery or perhaps riches. The same could apply here with this reported clandestine digging within the relieving chambers. Dunn does, however, rather succinctly sum this up by stating the following. "If this is true, we have reason to worry, for if the tunnel has ultimately reached their destination, who knows what damage they will inflict in this area. In a manner similar to explorations of earlier times, valuable features may be destroyed." So, what do you make of all of this? Is it complete hogwash, or is there something more to what is going on here? I've never heard or read of anyone else who has been up inside these relieving chambers having made any comments about digging, or about having seen any stray tunnels leading off to the south, or in any other direction for that matter. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. If you enjoyed this little video on this strange mystery, then please do consider subscribing if you have not already. It really does help to drive the engagement that the channel gets. I appreciate all of your input and your time spent watching, so thank you very much if you are still here at the end. I will see you all, hopefully, in the next video. So all the best, and bye-bye for now.